Out this morning. I tend to prefer to do Q&As, FYI. I love incorporating them into the discussion. And I know sometimes folks are shy. So if you want to hit me on my Twitter, it's at Bonnie Bernstein. If you have a question, I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. And just make sure you have hashtag HS17. And Roger, in the event that you want to chat with him afterwards or get connected, he's at
Money Mace,
MoneyMace on Twitter as well. So how many of you, just give me a show of hands, know about Roger's background other than the fact that he's commissioner of the Big Three right now? All right, good. Because when I started getting connected with Roger and delving into what we wanted to cover, yes, the Big Three launched yesterday, and we're definitely going to get into that. I want to hear about how that went. 15,000 people showed up at the inaugural event at Barclays Center, which is absolutely phenomenal. But the first thing I thought when I was reading about Roger is that he's a huge tech guy. And I'm like, 10-year, 11-year journeyman in the NBA. I tend not, quite frankly, to hear about a lot of guys who are really into tech other than trying to understand how analytics can help them play better. So, Roger, let's just start from the beginning. Growing up in Maryland, what was it that had you gravitating toward tech?
Well, I think I always gravitated early on as a kid to gadgets and electronics, and I was fortunate to have the video games, and I just was fascinated by what electronics could do as a kid, and as I grew older, just technology and how it changes the world was something that fascinated me.
What was your favorite tech gadget or game that you played?
When I was really young, there was a system, Neo Geo, that just created unbelievable graphics, and they were kind of ahead of the curve, and so I enjoyed that as a child. But just growing up into computers and understanding how the cell phone changed the world, and watching the evolution of that and apps, and it's just been something that I've paid a lot of attention to.
Yeah. Roger, after 10 or 11 seasons in the
11.
NBA. He went to UVA, so you got a Wahoo and a Terp sitting on the stage. So we're going to try to get along for the next half hour or so. But after your career, you got very involved in the Players Association, and you were the first solo deputy executive director. And on top of getting that collective bargaining agreement done, one of the marks I think that you left on the Players Association is how much you really emphasized with the players how important their brands were. And now I think personal brand is something that is part of our everyday vernacular, and I think through social media we all, to a certain degree, have the ability to be the CEO of our own brand. But why did you think that messaging and those conversations with the players were so important to emphasize with them?
Yeah, well, first of all, the Players Association, you want to maximize value for all of our players. And so I think that starts with your brand, both individually and then your brand as a group of players. And so we focused on that early. I think, as we continue to evolve in sports, the personalities are what help drive culture and drive success. So these guys understand. You look at LeBron James, probably one of the biggest brands other than Jordan from any NBA player. So they understand how important it is.
I've heard both sides of that, though. There are players, and I remember when Shaquille O'Neal, he was getting into rapping, and he really was such an uber entertainer as a player. But from a coach's standpoint and from a fan standpoint, they're like, well, you got all these other things going on. You're not focusing on your craft. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think you could do both. I really do. I think, everything has priorities, and as long as you understand the team is first, then it's fine. But ultimately, these guys are their own businesses, and the success and the notoriety they have can help drive not only their on court efforts, but a lot of their off court as well.
What would you consider the best branding strategy that you've seen from, it doesn't necessarily have to be a player in the NBA, but any of the pro athletes that you've been exposed to?
Well, I say Floyd Mayweather has done a pretty good job branding himself and making himself kind of this villain type of athlete that a lot of people care about, and you see how that's turned into him doing really well both in the ring and outside of it.
There's the flip side of that, though, because Mayweather has depending on how you feel about it, a history of domestic abuse. And that, it's a great point that you bring up, that, everything is sunshine and butterflies when things are going well. But when you are trying to build your brand and you're dealing with situations like that, what would your advice to somebody be?
Well, I think at the end of the day, what you do in your personal life and how you carry yourself will negatively affect that brand. So ultimately, for me and for the people that we've represented at the union, we want quality, high character people. And we know that can translate to success off the court. So certainly the way you carry yourself has a huge impact on your brand.
All right, so let's get to the here and now. You tell me the story. Did you have any relationship with Ice Cube before you came on as commissioner? And if you're not familiar with Big Three, this is Ice Cube's dream. He was a lifelong basketball fan, diehard Kobe fan, was there for his final game, the whole 60-point thing. And, it just occurred to him that with Kobe retiring, he had this vision of bringing a 3-on-3 basketball league to life. And you have been very much a part of that. So how did this whole thing all come together for you?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. While I was at the Players Association, we had a concept of a Players Award. And I brought in Ice Cube's longtime partner, Jeff Quadnitz, to help run marketing and run, along with obviously Michelle Roberts, who was our executive director. And through that time, we built a relationship. And during the 2011 lockout, we thought, well, while we're not playing in the NBA, how cool would it be? And I said, how cool would it be to have a 3-on-3 tournament, a day tournament? Because in a collective bargaining agreement, we could have one event, one basketball event in the off season. And so I kind of put it to rest after we got the lockout cleared. And, Jeff, after we finalized our collective bargaining agreement, said, look, I've been working on something for a year with Cube. It's really exciting, but I can't tell you what it is yet. And so
we're in stealth mode.
We're in stealth mode. So I said, okay, well, let me know when you can. And he did. And I was blown away by the thought that they really put into this 3-on-3 traveling league. They came to me, saying, look, you've got all this basketball experience and you've been doing what you've been doing at the Players Association. We'd love for you to be the commissioner and president. So I was humbled by it, one, but two, I thought the vision and the thought was huge, given that a lot of NBA players, when they're done playing, they still have gas in the tank. Can they play 5-on-5 full court for 82 games? Probably not. I wouldn't want to watch that. But when you talk about,
your candor is refreshing.
But when you talk about half-court basketball,
yep.
And being a former athlete myself, that's something that you can actually do. And the fact that they were giving you a week in between games, so just one game a week, and all these factors, I thought, this really does make sense. When you look at the PGA, at one point they had the senior PGA. For us, these guys retire at 31, and we call them old. And we're not really that old. And so I think that it's a sweet spot when you look at the summer and the programming there. And so I was excited, and I jumped right in.
All right, so give you the lay of the land here. It's a 10-week season, playing every Sunday, is that right? So
yep.
Every Sunday. First stop was New York, Charlotte, Tulsa, Philly, Nashville, Chicago, Lexington. So there's a nice mix of major markets and college towns. You've also got, you're at Staples Center, you're at Key Arena in Seattle. There are 8 teams, and there are 4 games each Sunday. What, from a structural standpoint, and we'll get into the game rules and some of the physical stuff in a minute, but what about the engagement during that day do you find unique?
Well, it's cool because we're only in a city one time a year. And if you're a fan, you get to watch all 40 of your favorite players. So there's 8 teams, and there's 5 players on each team, as well as a Hall of Fame, most likely coach. Yep. And so we love it because, we try to do well in that one city, and you allow a fan to, see all of their favorite players from the past out there competing at a high level. And the model seems much easier than having, a team that's from New York or a team from DC or a team from LA, we're a traveling league, and it makes things a lot easier.
I noticed that your coaches all have kind of an edge. You got Gary Payton, the glove. You got Iceman Gervin. You got Clyde the Glide Drexler. You got Dr. J. You got Rick Barry, Rick Mahorn, who, oh my, guy scares me. He was always so physical. Charles Oakley. How much design went behind that? Because ultimately, coaches, to a very large degree, represent what the league is.
Yeah, that's interesting, and that's the genius behind Ice Cube. From
all of those guys were his idea?
Well, not necessarily, but the fabric of how this league is going to be old school basketball. Some kind of grit. So when you look at Rick Mahorn and Charles Oakley, you're right.
AI. I don't even know how
AI
I
is a player
Iverson.
coach.
Sorry.
Right, but even Dr. J and Rick Barry, those guys are more old school, and they're Hall of Famers, but they know the game. And it's been so interesting seeing them talk the game and coach the game and get back really highly involved in basketball.
What's their interaction like? What was it like with that? I'm sure there was a lot of John going on yesterday.
Well, I think, Rick Barry's animated, and Brian Scalabrine, who's on the team, his, captain on that team is as well. So it's fun seeing those. It's fun seeing Gary Payton talking trash as a coach. I love that. And Dr. J, taking it as serious as he can. So, all these personalities are great. And that's what makes our league so fun is we've got personalities to go with the guys that still can compete.
All right, so I'm going to ask you the hard questions now. So 31 and up is old when you have been playing basketball since you've been a kid. And a couple injuries yesterday. White Chocolate got hurt, Jason Williams, Corey Maggette. How concerned are you about injuries when you've got a small league and you don't have huge rosters?
Well, I think with any sport, injuries are always a concern. So, that's the reality of sport. But I do think, at half court and, with limiting, the fact that we play once a week, I think our guys will be okay. We expect injuries. We have a pretty long injury reserve list of players that didn't get drafted during our combine. So are waiting in the wings to be a part of the league. But, we keep on going forward. I feel really bad for Jason. He worked really hard and was really excited about the season. But, somebody will come in and step up and have an opportunity.
All right, so let's grab a question here from I just had one. Okay, this is from Jay Kapoor. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, Jay, but I'm hoping that I am. Is the objective of this league to be serious basketball, or is this Celebrity All-Star meets the XFL?
What I would tell a person is watch Fox Sports tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, and you're going to see. I think it was highly, highly competitive, and there was no doubt in my mind, but that's a question that many people have asked often. And when you put NBA players in a court, I don't care how old they are, pride and the competitiveness comes out. And we saw that yesterday at a high level, extremely physical, and very, very competitive.
Who was involved in putting the rules together? Because hand checking is allowed. 4-pointers exist in this league. So how did your rule book come about?
So as a player and then as an executive with the NBA Players Association, I was on the competition committee. And that committee is comprised of general managers, a couple of owners, obviously referees in the league, and always looking at ways of improving the game of basketball. And obviously playing in the NBA for 11 years, I had a standard by which we played. So I had a huge part in putting together the rules. Q, being an avid basketball fan, had some ideas, like a 4-point shot, which I thought was genius.
Which really should exist in the NBA at this point.
Well, in half-court basketball, it really spaces the floor, and it's fun. You had a couple of guys hit those yesterday. But some of the rules, like hand checking, go back to old school basketball, and as guys get older, you want to be able to hand check a little bit without really getting too physical.
Well, it's funny because I was reading, no surprise, this quote came from Kenyon Martin, but he echoed the sentiment that you just said, that we want this to be a contact sport. There was a point in time where basketball truly was a contact sport. Are you advocating that?
Well, I think, Cube coming from the old school basketball heyday, so to speak, he likes that. And I think our players do as well. Now there's a balance, obviously, but to give somebody a little hand check here and there, we think it's good.
So what do you actually call? What are you going to call a foul?
Well, obvious fouls. You can't move somebody off their progress. And our penalties are pretty steep. After the fifth foul, you get to the bonus. So we're not encouraging fouling by no means.
Well, here's a good one. I think this is a follow-up. Who's this actually coming from? Do you think the Big Three will translate internationally? Is that actually a goal?
Yeah, well, right now, we're already in 60 countries in the world. Well, scratch that, 60% of the world. I knew it was a 60-something.
What's the distribution model? Are you working that all through Fox, or do you have separate deals?
Yeah, we have some separate deals. We're in Asia. We're not in China yet, but we probably will be soon. We're in Europe. And so this thing has been growing. 3-on-3 basketball is one of the most popular forms of sport.
Sure.
And with the recent announcement of the Olympics and 3-on-3 being an Olympic sport, and we're America's first professional 3-on-3 basketball team, we think it will translate globally. We've heard from a lot of different countries that want us to come after the regular season. So we're going to explore them, and this is certainly an international sport.
I remember thinking when I read the first article, when the announcement came out about the Big Three League, my initial thought was, what are you going to do to keep this competitive the entire season? And I think your business model is really smart. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so every player gets a flat 100,000, and that's consistent there. And then based on where you finish, you get more piece of the pie. So 52% of all revenue go to the players, and out of that 52%, if you win the league, you get 30% of that, and it kind of slides all the way down. So even in week 9, right, if you're playing for 7th or 8th seed, you're playing for double the money. And so it encourages highly competitive basketball throughout. And these guys, a lot of them have plenty of money, have made a ton of it, and they're not doing this necessarily just for a check. They're doing it for the competitiveness and the camaraderie and being back on the road. But there's an element of, the more I win, the more I make. So we think it's a good business model.
So when you look at the fact that essentially the players, they're majority owners of this league, they get 52% of the overall money. What was your thinking regarding that in terms of the league's road to profitability?
Yeah, well, I think in our business model, we have a long-term look on this. This isn't something that we think will be here for 5-6 years. This is something that we want to really last as a viable option as guys transition. So the model seems to work, and I think we have a great partner in Fox. We've been very happy with them, and we just think this thing is going to continue to build.
Why tape delay there? Yeah, it's been so long since probably the 80s when Commissioner Stern, started integrating games to the point that they were live. Some of you might not have even been born during the time when NBA games were on tape delay, but why that strategy for now?
Well, for now, our rules are we go to 60, so there's no clock. And so halftime is at 30. So take yesterday, for example. Game started at 1. Typically, when we did our simulations, we thought our games would be 35 to 40 minutes.
Yeah, you told me the event was going to be from 1 to 4, and there was a halftime in between.
The event went from 1 to about 6:15. So it ran longer, and this is a first-year league, so we wanted to give ourselves enough room. We think it was really smart. Even at the Olympics, things don't necessarily, you don't see it when it happens right away. So we thought that doing it on tape delay made the most sense. And in a first-year league, we've got 8 teams that no one's heard of. So no one cares if the Ball Hogs beat Trilogy. I think most people want to just watch these games. And early on, starting up, we thought it made the most sense.
Here's a great question from Mark Burns. Obviously, over-the-top platforms are blowing up. Live streaming platforms are blowing up. Have you had any discussions? And where would Fox fit in that picture of live streaming, particularly because you do want to build out a global market?
Yeah, we did. Before we signed our deal with Fox, we had a lot of interest from traditional, television networks and some streaming OTT platforms. I spoke to the people at Facebook Live who are trying to get more into sports. We spoke to Twitter's folks about their Twitter Live platform. So we explored, pretty much every platform you could think of, understanding where the world is going and how important mobile phones are as far as media goes.
You are very business savvy, but I'm just curious what it's been like for you, because as somebody who's been in the industry for 20 plus years now, my head is constantly clouded trying to figure out, these business models from a distribution standpoint continue to evolve on a daily basis. What's that experience been like for you trying to figure out the best place for this league to fit for your fans to see it?
It's been fun because it's been an interesting kind of intersection of sport and technology over the last 10 years. And the NBA has done a great job of integrating technology into sport. And I was fortunate enough to start going to the tech summits as a player, and I was probably the only player there at the time.
Awesome. Yep.
And every All-Star weekend, I would be excited about it. And understanding how analytics have changed our game, how these apps and OTT platforms continue to get value. As we started looking at the big three and what platforms we wanted to go to, I had some experience in understanding where the world was going there.
I want to give you props. Aimee Trask is your CEO, and she is one of the few female CEOs in sports. And I'm curious if your experience with Michelle Roberts, and you were instrumental in having her come on board for the NBA as its executive director, how much influence or maybe how much confidence did working with Michelle give you in hiring a woman for this league?
Well, I say Michelle Roberts is a rock star. And
Yes, she is.
I'll tell you, the 2.5 years that I got to spend under her wing at the Players Association helped me grow in more ways than one. And
How so? Give me a couple examples.
Well, first of all, she's a lawyer's lawyer. And so, I basically could have gone to law school for all the lawyers that we had at the union and understanding the way she looks at things. As we looked at bringing on a CEO, Aimee Trask is a lawyer as well. But has a real serious business mindset and understands sport. And Michelle was very similar in that. She put the players first. And I think when we looked at our CBA, we were well prepared. We had all the information, very organized. And that's something that Aimee brings to the table. Working for Al Davis for over 30 years.
And she's still alive to talk about it, which
Yeah, I just think that there's a lot to be said with that, and her track record speaks for itself, Aimee. But we were really fortunate to bring her on. I think we've got an outstanding team with Jeff Quatnitz, Ice Cube, myself, and Aimee. So certainly a dream team, so to speak.
if you were going to point to an instrumental contribution Aimee's made to this point, what would that be?
Well, I think as soon as she came in, running a NFL franchise, she knows how to run sport companies. And Aimee from day one has just been amazing with how she's putting together kind of this macro look on our season and our league. So she's been great.
You mentioned a couple of minutes ago that the NBA was a great training ground for you in terms of tech and ingenuity and being forward thinking. And I remember one of the first keynotes that I saw Adam Silver give. He was talking about how, rather than lamenting the fact that all of our fans have their faces stuffed in their smartphones, let's embrace that. Let's find a way to integrate the digital experience, the social experience into the NBA fan experience. How are you doing that?
Well, first of all, I was taking notes from Adam and before him, David, and the way that they've integrated in sports. I think for us, we want to really kind of push the envelope on what a league in 2017 can look like. And if you could create a league with social media and technology, how would you do that? And that's kind of what we've done. Most kids or most folks that are under 30, they found out about the big three through social media. And it's a different day, and I really think UFC may be the only league that's launched that way. So it's been a great kind of test case for us on the way to impact millennials in sports at a time where everyone's on their cell phone.
Give me some examples of how you're integrating tech, and that can be whether that's aggregating data to understand your fan base, to technology that maybe the players are using to help them, make sure they're making the most of their practice time and trying to avoid injuries and all that sort of stuff.
Well, I think at a core, our players are engaging their fans themselves and evangelizing the league. And it starts just as simple as that. We've got 48 guys who have been marketed for over 15 years, whether in college or the NBA. So they've got a set fan base to start with. So when they're talking about the league and they're talking about their excitement with the league, that's one thing that helps. I think obviously the major Twitters and Instagrams and Facebooks and getting the message on what this league is early through social media has been a major driver.
This is an awesome question from Josh Margulies. Has Cube reached out to MJ or Kobe about playing in the league? And I'll add, or coaching.
Yes and yes.
And?
Well, MJ.
Want to make any news right on this stage, right here, just between us?
MJ is an owner of an NBA team, so he can't. Although
okay.
I know that guy's so competitive, I'm sure he'd love to try to come back on the court and show something. And Kobe is still fresh. I think he's still figuring out. He's doing a lot in venture. He's doing some stuff with content himself, and I think we want to give it another year, have him miss it a little bit, and then hopefully he'll come join. I'll tell you one thing. Yesterday, Paul Pierce showed up and was blown away. And I wouldn't be surprised if he has the itch to join this league as well.
Give me 5 guys who aren't, and this is including reserves, part of the league that, if you had carte blanche access, who would you want?
Tracy McGrady, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan for sure. Then it gets tricky.
Why?
Those 3 jump out at me. Who's retired? Give me some help here.
Anyone?
Tim Duncan. How could I forget?
Oh, Duncan would be
Tim
awesome.
Duncan for sure. And I tried to get Timmy. He was my teammate. He didn't call me back. Timmy, call me, man. Next year.
Hit him on Twitter. Maybe he'll respond.
If you know anything about Tim Duncan, Twitter, he may not have ever seen a Twitter.
No. He probably calls it the Twitter, if that. So tech-wise, you also have a separate venture going on, which for those of us who are constantly leveraging social to brand ourselves and not getting paid for it, although influencer marketing has started to grow quite a bit, I think this venture that you're working on is fantastic. It's called Vaunt.
Yep.
It's launching in September. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, no, Vaunt is really cool. It's the 3rd company that the founder and CEO and I have been a part of, and it's basically an OTT platform that monetizes celebrity content through a subscription-based model. And the cool thing about Jeff and Cube is when they brought me on to Big 3, they told me that Vaunt was a great complement to it, and I could continue to be involved in it. And so I liken it to a team owner buying a team and having an RSN, a regional sports network there that these sports franchises are essentially content generators.
Absolutely.
That's what they are, and that's what this league is. And so for Vaunt, we shoot all lifestyle content. So whether it's basketball players and the lives of those guys, or football players, or musicians, or artists, or soccer players like Ronaldo Lima, who we have on the platform, and Gabriel Jesus, these guys have great talents on the court, but their fans care about their life off the court. And so what Vaunt does is it gives them a platform to monetize that, kind of like the Uber for celebrities to monetize their content.
And how would that work? Is that some sort of ad-based rev share, or what would that look like?
Yeah, so the model is pretty simple. There's free content that we generate through marketing and advertising, and then there's $2.99 where they can live stream with their fans, but also have high quality content that Vaunt shoots in-house.
And how much will the 3-ball league be sort of a training ground for getting this thing off and running, or will you use them as sort of a beta test?
Yeah, well, the Big 3, we've been shooting all the lifestyle content for that. So the trailers that come out are coming from Vaunt, and then definitely have signed a lot of big soccer players and basketball players, and artists and models and fitness folks, and so there's many verticals on the platform.
Well, I know I hear the door opening, so Steve, I know we were running a little bit behind, but we got a couple more minutes, or we're pretty much. Okay, last question. When you look at this league 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, NBA has developmental league, they got their summer league, all this sort of, do you look at this not just as a platform for retired players, but an alternative and potentially a training ground for guys to get to the NBA rather than vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think we're a complement to the NBA. And so you've got the D League. We have a 30-year age. You got to be at least 30 years old. And so we think that as guys transition from the NBA, as they get tired of the wear and tear, as they say, I want to be around my family a little bit more, rather than just quitting basketball altogether, they can transition. And there's always a new player who's been marketed and played well for at least a decade that's ready to maybe not stop playing basketball, but stop traveling 41 times and playing back-to-backs. And so we feel like we have a great opportunity year in and year out to get great talent.
Roger Mason, great insight on three-ball and business and tech, and congratulations on a great career so far. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Take a picture real quick. All right, everybody. We've got a rolling schedule here, so obviously,